All right, Grant, take it away.
All right, thanks, Jason. Good afternoon, and welcome back to many of you today. We're excited to continue our 2021 NAD Spring Development Series with session number 3 of 8. This series will take us right up to our virtual convention this upcoming July. So thanks again for joining us and your dedicated support of the NAD community. My name is Grant Kelly. I'm the Senior Associate Director of Athletics at Johns Hopkins University. And once again, I want to personally thank our NAD digital committee members for putting together this series. We want today's discussion to be really interactive, so please feel free to post your questions to the Q&A section, and we'll do our absolute very best to answer them throughout the session. So, leading and moderating our discussion today is Jeremy Wang. Jeremy is the Associate Vice President for Development at Temple University and a member of the NAD Executive Committee. In his role at Temple, he oversees fundraising activities for 12 of the university's schools and colleges, 4 central services, and the Intercollegiate Athletics Program. Jeremy previously served as the head athletics fundraiser at Temple, University of California, Berkeley, and Villanova. All right, Jeremy, take us away and good luck today. Thanks again.
Thanks, Grant. Appreciate it, buddy. Hey, welcome, everyone. We're excited to have you on today's webinar. We've got a great panel for you today. I was talking to my wife about the panel today and the topic, and she goes, "Oh, great. This will be one where you can't just rattle your mouth the whole time." So I'm thrilled to be able to have Leah Fenske, Lexi Cross, and Tom Klein with us here today. Couple things wanted to let you know. If you have questions throughout the webinar, please drop it into the Q&A box down below. Just so you know, I've got a screen over here where I'm monitoring some of the questions as they come in when we get to the Q&A portion. So if I'm looking over here, well, there's no basketball yet, right? That starts tonight. So it's not like I've got a game going on over here or anything like that. But thrilled to have you here today. This is a topic that, as an NAD executive committee, we get a lot of questions on and a lot of sort of proactive women's initiatives. How do I do this? What's the best practice? Who can I talk to? And certainly Lexi and Leah have kind of risen as the subject matter experts in this area. We're also thrilled to have Tom Klein on the call here today, or on the panel today. And so I'm going to go ahead and let them introduce themselves to you. We will start with Lexi, go to Tom, and then to Leah, and then Leah's got a video to go ahead and kick us off. So Lexi, if you would.
Thanks, Jeremy. Excited to be here today. My name is Lexi Cross. I'm with the University of Oregon, and I'm the director of our Women in Flight program out there. I also am an associate director of development for some major gifts and special event work. So excited to be here and share with you what we've been able to do.
Great. Thanks, Lexi, and thanks, Jeremy. Tom Klein, Vice President for Institutional Advancement at Carthage College. I've been in this role for 4 years now, at the college for a total of 8 years. If you're wondering why Carthage might sound so familiar to you, I do know that our late colleague Bob Bond was our athletic director for 25 years, and I believe was connected closely to many of you. We miss Bob very much, and I'm thrilled to be here and representing Carthage and talking about our 150 years of Carthage Women fundraising initiative and celebration.
And my name is Leah Fenske. I'm a major gifts director with the Rams Club at the University of North Carolina at Chapel Hill, and I head up our Forever Tar Heels effort. I'm really excited to be here with everyone. And as Jeremy said, I'm going to kick us off with a quick video testimonial from one of our current female student athletes. Her name is Brianna Pinto. She is a women's soccer student athlete. And she is a member of our Forever Tar Heels Advisory Board. So she serves as a student athlete representative on that board. And she actually was just recently drafted number 3 in the NWSL draft. So she'll be going pro after she finishes up this spring season. And so if I can do this technologically, I'm going to share my screen and show you guys her quick testimonial.
I would always rave about getting the chance to attend the University of North Carolina and being a part of the Forever Tar Heels initiative. This work experience and just seeing this initiative grow has been so special to me because it shows me how a project that was once an idea came to life and is ultimately changing lives of so many different women athletes at Carolina. And I think once I'm further down the line, I get to share those experiences and maybe even build upon them. Like, how can we bring Forever Tar Heel Initiative to other communities and even expand beyond that? And I think what we're doing here is special, and I think it should be the standard. We should champion our women athletes wherever we are. So even if you expanded to other schools in our community, I think Carolina would be a pioneer in that sense, and we'd be setting the standard for what it means to be a female athlete in college. And I hope that this truly gets all the glory that it deserves, because I'm so incredibly grateful to be a part of this initiative.
Back to you, Jeremy.
Thanks, Leah, for sharing that video. So as you folks can see, we've got a good representation here of schools, right? So we've got Lexi and Leah, Power 5 schools, to talk specifically about their athletics women's initiatives. And then Tom, we were really happy to bring on board a VP for advancement, leading a women's initiative that has athletics, but then encompasses the entire institution, right? Also, Carthage is a D3 school as well. And so as we were prepping for this, you guys, I was really kind of struck by how different your programs are, how different your initiatives are, right? And so if you each wouldn't mind sharing, give us a little bit about your program. What do you mean when you say a women's initiative? And tell us about the why behind it getting started, what you're trying to accomplish at your institutions. Why don't we go Leah, Lexi, and then Tom, why don't you back clean up?
Awesome. Thanks, Jeremy. So for us, it really came out of a fundraising first mindset. We were in the middle of a university-wide campaign. The Rams Club's goal in that campaign was the third largest on campus at 500 million by 2022. And we were kind of thinking, what can we do to re-energize folks? How can we get better? And so from a fundraising standpoint, myself and some of our other fundraising colleagues, in particular, my colleague Sue Walsh, who is our most decorated former student athlete actually at Carolina, kind of sat down and looked at how can we really tap into transformational giving? Let's get away from this mindset of transactional. That's always going to be there, but how can we really expand on this idea of transformational giving and truly philanthropic giving? And so we were thinking about donor groups that we could look to that really were motivated by impact. So that was kind of the donor side. And then on the flip side, we thought if we're going to start something, and as we started thinking about those donor groups, women give for very different reasons. There's lots of research out there about why women give versus men, et cetera. That idea of women kind of came up, but really we wanted it to be bigger than that and it to be about transformational giving. But on the flip side of that, we thought about, okay, well, if we're going to do something around women, we'd like to help our women student athletes. What do they need? Like, let's not make this just sort of a temporary thing. Like, let's really invest in them and make this real. And so we talked to female student athletes. We talked to the coaches of our women's sports, alums of those programs, donors to those programs, and administrators. And kind of the theme that came out of those discussions was, our women student athletes are great athletes, but they understand that the value of their opportunity at Carolina goes far beyond that. It's their education, it's the network that they're going to create here, it's the lessons they're going to learn, and it's where it's going to take them in their career. So they were asking for a greater mentorship networking opportunity here to really showcase how valuable that piece of this experience is for our student athletes. And so the why for us was, let's marry those two. Let's create a really great fundraising first initiative that allows us to bring in dollars for our women student athletes, but also allows us to invest in them in a very real way that can be around forever. And, eventually could even help our coaches recruit the best female student athletes, that it's such a landmark thing. And so, we created an initiative that really encompassed all of the priorities that we already had in our campaign. We wanted it to help us raise that money. And then we also added a few other sort of specialty funds that could really enhance the mentorship, the networking, the full student athlete experience. And that allowed us to engage with our alums in a completely new way with new messaging that has really, really resonated. And so our why, we went as far as to write a mission statement. It is to cultivate a Carolina community that champions and empowers our women student athletes. And we do that through fundraising, mentorship, networking, and those kinds of things.
Awesome. Lexi?
Thanks, Leah. It's so fun hearing about other programs. We've had the pleasure of speaking with a lot of schools around the country, and to Jeremy's point, everyone does it so differently, which is incredible. Women in Flight was launched in 2014, and it was donor driven in the beginning. We had a donor that has been incredibly philanthropic across our university and saw a need and saw an opportunity to challenge our administration and to raise questions about what more could we do? What more could we do for the female student athletes experience specifically? So along with Leah, we also wrote a mission statement, and our mission is to raise awareness and financial support to maintain excellence across all Oregon women's programs. So that looks really different all the time. We have a lot of different areas that we support, but our biggest focus, and this was donor driven as well, was sustainability. How can we create a program that elevates the female student athlete experience and maintains it for years and years to come? We didn't want to launch a fundraising initiative that became hard to maintain, became hard to go back to donors over and over again, asking to continue doing what we were doing. So we actually launched our program as its own annual fund. And we're focused on building a community around women's athletics that would meet a goal every year to continue to support the programmatic additions we decided on. Out of that blossomed a major gift fund as well. So we now have our Women's Athletic Excellence Fund that we use for major gifts, we use for special projects. So we kind of have two main revenue streams. And coming back to our why, that sustainability was a big part. And it was also to make this bigger than the University of Oregon. I love that video of that student athlete, Leah, because she says it right there. She wants it to be more than Forever Tar Heels. We want it to be more than Women in Flight. And I know on behalf of both of us and Tom as well, I think that's why we're on this webinar, is because we want to help. We want a lot of people, and not just me, many people before me have done a lot of the grudge work to get these things going and have gone down the wrong path and steered it back. So we're hopefully going to be able to provide some guidance and a little bit of best practice that we've found along the way.
Great point, Lexi. Tom, tell us a little bit about Carthage and your folks' initiative.
Sure. So our initiative was called 150 Years of Carthage Women, and we actually, we stumbled into it by accident. It was during one of our, we had a new president at the time. This was 4 years ago. He was doing some research, and he had come from two previous institutions, his alma maters, didn't admit women until the late 1960s. And so he was struck by the fact that we've been educating women for 150 years. And so I was listening to that speech, and kind of a light bulb went off, like, okay, let's not miss this opportunity. And this was in a broader context. So I'd been at the college for a number of years. And we, historically have had difficulty or a lack of strategy attracting women leaders, especially at the board of trustee level. Out of 25 trustees, 4 were women. We talked about it almost every meeting, and there was very, little kind of strategy behind how to build and develop that pipeline, leadership pipeline, et cetera. So all of that kind of came together in a really beautiful way. So it was about, celebrating the past while looking to the future, shifting our culture, identifying women leaders and donors, and really I wanted to arrive in a new place, at the end of this, where the institution felt differently. There was a new, sense of pride, and also most importantly, that we raised a lot of money along the way. And so this was essentially, we built an 18-month campaign around this, complete with volunteer structure. So we had a 70-person alumni committee, a steering committee. We had an internal committee, and we had 4 fundraising priorities: women's athletics, financial aid for women, experiential learning from women, and estate commitments from women. And it was all a huge success. We raised $8.2 million in gifts and pledges, which is a big deal for us. We typically have a handful of endowed scholarships, and we had 22 in one year in honor of women and with a preference for women in different ways. And it was just, and sustainability was also very important for us. So in an ongoing way, we will have an annual celebration, usually on, well, it'll be around International Women's Day on March 9th. So not this year, but in subsequent years, where we have the donors come back, have special programming, meet our recipients of scholarships. And so this is a way to kind of institutionalize this in a long way, in a sustainable way. So that's a little bit about 150 years of Carthage Women.
That's great. I think, listening, you got a sense of, I heard president, donor, people that came before me, coaches, student athletes. There's a lot of people that are, involved in making sure this is a success. And I hopefully everyone got a taste of how different, in the different ways that this manifested itself, this desire, this drive at your specific institution. So as you're getting this up off the ground, right? So going into the how to, all right, we want to do this. How do we do this? The way to get this off the ground, a lot of people involved, right? So tell us a little bit about, how these things get started, who was critical on your campus or within your athletic department to involve to make this a success. And so why don't we go, Lexi, Tom, and Leah, will have you wrap us up.
Definitely a team effort. I say that all the time. In everything that we do, it is a team effort. We have our major gift fundraisers out there fundraising for Women in Flight on a daily basis. But from the beginning, I could name a million different departments, a million different people, but I think for us to have the full buy-in from the top down about this program and what we were hoping to do with it was so key. It was so key to establishing credibility in the community and to defining our voice as Women in Flight and what our program was going to be about, the impact it was going to create, and the stories that we were going to be able to tell because of it. That came from our athletic director, Rob Mullins. That came from our senior women's administrator, Lisa Peterson. And it became all of us working together to build this in the way that fit with our university and the goals of both our women's programs and our entire athletic department as a whole.
Mm-hmm.
Yep, I would say very similar at Carthage. President was completely behind that, behind the initiative. One of our trustees served as co-chair, which kind of gave the trustee strength to that. And from the programming standpoint, the fundraising, obviously my shop handled, and that was off and running. But to make this an institutional wide initiative, we had our three deans who all are women on that. We had our athletic director, who at the time was a woman, and they really provide a lot of the meat. So for the internal or for the volunteer committee, when they're talking about programs on campus or in the community, we needed that collaboration with our academic partners for faculty to bring in speakers or provide a lecture or a class or something to get our students motivated and in the room at the right times. So it really was an institution-wide initiative, and it needed to be if it was going to be as successful as it was. Oh, I would add one more thing: legal counsel. So the first thing we did was we approached our legal counsel. We were doing another initiative for our Black alumni too, and before we proceeded, we wanted some advice about how to do this, with the right language, with the right structure. And so that's actually where we started before we put together our case statement and other structures.
Yeah, good point, Tom. Leah, let me jump in before. Leah talks about being involved. One of the things that we talked about in setting this up is understanding how your institution's fundraising apparatus is set up, right? So, Leah and Lexi both are at institutions that have separate foundations, right? Separate 501c3s that are raising money on behalf of the institution. Tom's institution, Carthage, does not have a foundation, right? And so understanding, as Tom said, whether it's women, whether it's your Black and African American students, when you are looking at, raising money for restricted classes, right? Make sure you're involving your legal counsel and your leadership to look at methods, whether it's through a foundation. And this is some homework reading for people if you're interested in it, but Carthage awards scholarships in a pool and match method of scholarships. So making sure that your legal is on board so that you're not in violation or running afoul of Title VI of the Civil Rights Act is important as you're setting these things up. So thank you, Tom, for bringing that up and reminding us the importance of involving counsel in this. Leah, go ahead.
Yeah, no, that's a super important point. And we were, again, very similar to everybody here. It was a huge team effort. We had an internal working team within our own athletic development shop that had everybody from, marketing and communications to, senior leadership there to scholarship to major gifts. We tried to represent every part of our business that it was going to touch in that planning committee so that everybody was on board and pulling in the same direction. And then similarly, we try to involve compliance. We try to involve athletics communications. We try to involve our coaches, our student athletes. And we really tried to involve, the donors that we felt like at least were already in our circle that would care about this. We've been raising money for women's athletics for as long as, women's athletics has been around, but it doesn't mean that we can't get better and we can't be more intentional about that effort. And so we wanted to get the input of the people who had been championing our women all along. And so we actually decided, in addition to, administrators and coaches and everybody internally that was going to functionally make this happen, that we wanted the input in kind of a formal way from our donors and our coaches and our student athletes. So we created this Forever Tar Heels advisory board. And part of that was to get buy-in, but it was also to make sure that we stayed true to our mission. Like, let's make sure that this is going to help us raise money, and let's make sure that this is going to really better the experience for our female student athletes. And, coach buy-in was really important. And so, yes, compliance signed off on any, mentorship opportunities that we were creating. Our fundraising structure didn't really change to do this. We similarly, obviously all of our scholarships for women's sports count in this initiative as well. It's an umbrella initiative. So, we kind of do a similar pool and match stewardship program for our female scholarship our scholarship donors in female sports. And so that part was okay by our legal counsel, but we wanted to make sure that compliance saw the value in this as well, and saw that we were, anytime we were going to have donors interacting with our student athletes, that we were doing that on the up and up. And it's worked out really well. But I would definitely say the more voices that you involve, the harder it gets to stay true to your mission as well. It can get really easy to become distracted, especially away from the fundraising purpose, because people will get really excited about stewardship or mentorship or networking, or you should talk to this person. And that's all really important. But I think having fundraisers front and center in the planning was really important, because it allowed us to keep that front and center. And that's something we still have to do to this day.
Yeah. Leah, stay on for a second, because I'm going to go backwards here. Beautiful segue into the next question of lots of cooks in the kitchen, right? Lots of people that want to, get at supporting, your female athletes, or, empowering women to be involved philanthropically. What are, for the panel, what were some of the challenges? And I even believe in the prep that we were doing, some of the distractions that you guys ran into when setting these up. We'll go backwards, Leah, Tom, and then Lexi.
Yeah, I'm really glad you brought that up, because that actually leads me to talk about one other really important group that I forgot to mention, which is our student athlete development team. We knew that we wanted to implement, as part of this initiative, both in terms of stewardship for people that were supporting our women's student athletes, and also as cultivation for maybe people that we never had the right way to get in front of them, or the right thing to see if they might be interested in, create a mentorship program, a one-on-one, woman-to-woman mentorship program. And that definitely does not mean that this initiative is only for women to give, but it was one unique opportunity that filled the bucket that our student athletes asked for, was mentorship. And that had immense fundraising potential for us, but that was basically creating a program that didn't exist and could easily pull me or any of our other, fundraising staff members away from full-time fundraising. And while we have to do some of that, our student athlete development team was so willing to help with that programming side, and they've been so vital to the success of that part of it. That I think, to your point about challenges, it was finding the right partners early on and making, again, really clear, here's our mission in this. Here's how we could use your help. And anytime we felt like we were getting distracted from that, figuring out, okay, is the thing that's distracting us something that another group can help us with, or is it really not helping us achieve what our mission is? And if it's not helping us achieve what our mission is, how do we, politely kind of veer back towards our mission and stay on that? And, internally, we talk a lot about this being another tool in the toolkit of our fundraisers. I'm a fundraiser, and so I try to bring this up anytime our, major gift team meets, if there's something relevant that helps them have a meaningful touch point with a prospect or a donor. And I try to do the same as I look through my portfolio. So in terms of challenges, I think for us, it was really, and continues to be, just staying focused on that. And anytime you have something you want to market or an event or a stewardship plan or mentorship, anything like that, it can get you kind of pulled in different directions, but just make sure that you have people that care about it and that understand the mission, so that you can always kind of come back to that central component, even when you feel like it's getting very complicated.
Great. Tom?
Sure. Yeah, I would second that. The balance is important. I remember having to, sit down with our major gifts team early on. We have a smaller shop, and so we all pitch in to help as needed. And there was a point that came where it was like, okay, timeout. Is this advancing our major gifts work? And if not, let's try to refocus and pass off some of these things if we can. And so that was a struggle throughout. And which is why I'm very deliberate to say this was a campaign first. That's why it's being run out of the advancement office. That is, a celebration as well, with events and et cetera. So that was a challenge. I would also say, and this is a little more sensitive, there were certain, with voices in the room, some people wanted this to be more of a Me Too movement sort of edition, and that was not our original intent. There was specific programming that was designed for that, led out of our academic affairs division, but it was one of those conversations that we had a few times over the course of the celebration. So it was delicate, and we had to message it in the appropriate way. And then finally, everybody's favorite topic, COVID. COVID just destroyed all of our programming. We had the best year of programming lined up. We had our women's athletic reunions, sorority reunions, all sorts of great, concerts and guests coming to campus that were essentially, either moved to this fall or just, we stopped doing it. So that was a frustration. It didn't impact our fundraising as much as I thought it might. But having an 18-month campaign and COVID right in the midst of that, definitely hindered our events.
Sure. Lexi?
Tom spoke a little bit about their voice and making sure that what they were branding their initiative as was maintained in all the different areas. And I can't even imagine, I was excited to hear from Tom today just about all of the integration across campus. I've been taking notes over here. But that's one thing for Women in Flight that we've tried to stay really focused on, and to both Leah and Tom's points, has been challenging throughout the years, is just maintaining that voice and that message in the right way, in the way that fits for your university and for your mission, and whatever that may be, whether that's through events, through your marketing materials, through the campaigns that you put together, through major gift campaigns as well, making sure that voice stays the same and resonates with the target group that you're trying to reach. Backtracking a little bit, when we were first launching our program, and I want to give props here to Callie Wagner, who was very integral in the first couple years of our program, that she was very thoughtful about that voice, but the entire group was answering questions when it came to the structure and thinking of it from a sustainable mindset. How can we set this structure up as something that will succeed 5 years from now, 10 years from now, 15 years from now? And more importantly, how can we adjust as we go. So our program was started with $1 million lead gift. And in the beginning, that gift was budgeted out over 3 years to fund the launch of this program and to fund building an annual fund group and to fund all of our events and all of our elevated programming we're providing to our female student athletes. We ended up needing to stretch that to 5 years and to build that pipeline and kind of adjust our goals as we go to be able at year 6 to come back and say, we are sustainable. We can raise the same amount in our annual dollars as we were utilizing from that initial gift. So I think changing on the fly was something that needed to be, it was really important to the future success. And then the last thing I would say is how it is a challenge that we faced when it came to, and it's not necessarily one that we faced all that much, and I know we're going to talk about it a little bit later, but coach and student athlete involvement and how can we build it in as something that resonates with them too, as opposed to being another thing on their to-do list that they have to do. And I know we'll talk about that later, so I'll save the rest.
Well, that's a good transition, just like Leah did with the last question. My next question was going to say, with these folks that are, we talked about how there's this team and this community behind, a big effort at all your institutions, right? Getting top down buy-in, making sure that everyone, has a role to play. I also imagine that you had some winning of hearts and minds that you had to do with some of your, whether it's leadership or Lexi, you said, student athletes from a, thing on there to do, right? So I'm thinking, leadership, coaches, student athletes, who were you tell me, who were the people or the individuals that you had to, maybe do a little convincing to get on board, to get behind what you were doing? And how did you go about that? So Lexi, why don't we stick with you? We'll go to Leah and then we'll finish with Tom.
I would say that for us specifically, there wasn't a ton of convincing. However, in my conversations with other schools, coaches is a big topic that comes up. And for our benefit, we had never focused on specific sport giving all that much, but I know that that's a common question where if your coaches are used to fundraising for their program specifically, how do you wrap this initiative in that's for all women's programs as a whole? And we were able to have that conversation with our coaches and say, look, we believe and we know that we can raise more money for all programs by fundraising for the whole. And what we found, and I think what other schools have found to be true as well, is that these coaches coach women's sports for a reason. And there are no better advocates out there for the entire mission of women's athletics than the people who spend their days, men and women, coaching young women every single day. It's literally their life mission to make them better and to be there for them. So I think that's one thing that has been a sticky situation for some people. We weren't faced with that necessarily, but I did want to touch on that for the group and kind of let them know how we navigated it. And we do that with new coaches that come in anytime we hire a new coach on our women's side, we make sure to sit down with them and explain the program and explain the success that it's had and what we ask of them to be a part of it, whether it's events or collateral or whatever it may be.
Right. Leah.
Yeah, I would say, again, huge props to our executive director, John Montgomery, and our AD, Bubba Cunningham, who believed in this from the minute the idea was kind of put forth. It was not something we could have really accomplished if we felt like we had to convince people at the top, and they were all for it right away. So it was less about convincing people and more so anticipating potential sticking points and trying to be proactive. And I would say, similar to Lexi, I think we thought coaches might be an issue. And, I was really fortunate to be in this role after some other schools had already started things like this. So I called Lexi and I called some people at Miami and at Louisville who were doing different things even at that point. And everybody was doing it differently. And that just kind of got our wheels turning about coaches. And it was actually another one of our major gift directors who said, well, how can you incentivize coaches, make it real for them so that they immediately tie their involvement and their sort of promotion of this initiative as a direct benefit to their program? And so we did a couple things. One, we have team operating endowments for every single one of our sports that run through our office. And that's how it's always been. And, those fall under the fundraising numbers for this initiative as well, just the same as scholarships or capital projects. But we also have what we call friends accounts for every sport on campus, including our women's sports. And those are less of long-term investments in those programs and more immediate sort of annual dollars that the coaches can use at their discretion. And those dollars had always flown through the university to the teams directly to their operating budget. And that's still how it works. But what we decided to do was also count the dollars that the coaches were raising for those friends accounts in this initiative. So it incentivized them and helped them feel like part of it, knowing that if they went and got, $1,000 in their friends account, that would be part of the Forever Tar Heels initiative. And they could use our messaging and use our tools and our strategies to help them get that money as well. And then beyond that, we, similarly to what Lexi was describing, created a Forever Tar Heels Excellence Fund as one of two kind of specialty funds that was brand new when we launched this initiative. It was that one and a Forever Tar Heels Scholarship Fund. And the Forever Tar Heels Excellence Fund was unique for us in the sense that it was and is unrestricted dollars for women's athletics. And so the idea behind that fund was like, if you just care about what athletics can do for the development of young women, this is the fund for you. And we really marketed that fund as the fund that would support all these additional enhancements to women's athletics. So mentorship, networking, any event programming. But we also said, hey, coaches, you can essentially submit grant requests to this fund. And we had an internal committee of a few folks from our office, compliance, some of our senior women leaders in our athletic department that would review those requests. And we actually asked coaches, hey, think through how many student athletes what you're asking for will touch as far as funding. Think about how this is going to improve their student athlete experience. Think about how it's going to prepare them for life after college and life after their sport. And it continues to be a little bit of a process of working with sport administrators to kind of coach the coaches on how to make those funding requests. But the coaches that got money, and we only got to do it, 1 year that way before COVID hit, and then we kind of pivoted. But the coaches that received money directly out of that fund, it was an immediate mental tie between the money that they got in this initiative. And so they've been so involved from day one because they understand this is brand new money that's coming in, and it can really benefit their program. So we are open to other ideas with that particular fund and how we'll distribute it moving forward. And we've tried a few other things as well. But I would say if you're worried about coach involvement, anything that directly ties the fundraising to something that they're going to see impact their program is really effective.
Great. Thanks, Leah. Tom?
Oh, Leah, you just gave it. That's a great idea. The Excellence Fund. Now I regret that we didn't do that. So we have to tie that in going forward. So I would, in terms of winning people over, it was pretty clear sailing for us. The one thing I would add is that being a male, I was oftentimes I was one of the only males in the room, and I that was important. I think it was important to hear, or for me to say, well, I don't know if we should word it exactly that way, because I think we might, we want to bring men along with this initiative as well. And we did, and we fundraised just as much for men as we did for women, all with the same goal. So that would just be one piece of advice that I would provide as well, is to not forget about men, both from a fundraising and from an engagement, while, most of the programming was by and for women, but, men have a role to play as well.
Yeah. I'll ask you guys one more question and then we'll jump into some audience submissions. It's the ugly one, right? And we talked about this just because it's out there, right? Is this just for window dressing and optics, or like, did you actually raise any money? Like, did you actually change out the things that you set to do? Like, give us the ROI, give us the proof of concept of, Lexi, you talked about sustainability. Tom, obviously you've got some real numbers. I mean, we buried the lead a little bit. Yes, there is a big impact. Share with us, how you saw your initiatives raise money, change lives, change culture. I mean, this is the exciting part, right? So why don't we go Leah, Lexi, Tom?
Yeah, it does have an ROI. So for us, the way that we count our dollars, we wanted to encompass the priorities that were already part of our campaign that benefit women. And so that number to date is 73 million in this campaign for women's athletics. And we've set a goal of 100 million in this campaign towards that goal. So we are moving right along. And then in terms of brand new dollars that just opened new opportunities for us, and this is within a year and a half, we've raised almost $2 million in the Forever Tar Heels Excellence Fund and almost $1 million in our Forever Tar Heels Scholarship Fund. So that is part of that 73 million, but that is money that we just never would have even known to go get if we didn't have this opportunity. And I certainly think if any of our other gift officers were on this call today, and I can speak from personal experience, having this, going back to the why, having this really clear way to frame a gift conversation around the impact and around the transformational effect that athletics can have for young women has certainly moved the needle in the other buckets that fall into that 73 million: scholarship, capital projects, team support. Across the board, I think we saw so many people, whether they were already donors we knew about or brand new donors, hear this message and come forward, or it allowed us to bring forward a new gift idea in a way we just hadn't talked about before. So yes, it is an awesome tool to grow diversity. It's an awesome tool to, hand to your marketing team and say, get creative. But it really can help you fundraise. And I think, Lexi and I have spent a lot of time talking about this over, the last year or so. And that's something that I know we're both really proud of and see as the main reason why we're excited to be on a phone call like this, is because there's huge potential, and there's huge potential to invest in women through programs like this.
Awesome. Lexi.
To echo Leah, I think that's a common misconception, and probably was when we started this program, we thought that it was going to be primarily women giving to this program, and weren't sure what the data would look like there. But to echo Leah, we have found that this is absolutely a new revenue stream for the most part, whether it's new donors or existing donors that give additionally because of this message, because of the philanthropic impact that Leah mentioned. So I think we would love to report research questions and pose research questions on exactly what that donor data looks like. Unfortunately, we don't have that. We're working on that on a little side project. But it is a new revenue stream. And for instance, when we launched our Women's Athletic Excellence Fund, our major gift fund, our first 5 gifts that were committed were the same lead major gift donors from our university that committed additional major gift dollars that our fundraisers weren't asking for, because they didn't know that they were willing to give that much more. So I think that's a huge point that we want to hit home, or that I want to hit home. As far as our ROI specifically, we count our dollars a little bit differently, but from an annual perspective for our Women in Flight annual fund, we talked about that sustainability and budgeted that $1 million out over 5 years, which was coming in at about $333,000 per year that was supporting the entire operation of Women in Flight. That's my position, that's team building opportunity, that's foreign tours, that's scholarship support, all of the things that choose to support every year. And at year 6, we were able to bring those numbers back to our lead donor and say, 365,000, we are sustainable. And since then, we have maintained that. We've exceeded that, and we continue to push that bar and hopefully get more and more every year. And that's coming from around a little over 1,400 donors, some of which had given previously, some of which had not at all. And in our major gift fund, we have anywhere between $1 million and $2 million in there at any given time. And the way that fund works for us is it's through our senior women's administrator, who, similarly to Leah a little bit, coaches don't necessarily put in grant requests, but we do develop a bit of a wish list or a bit of a priorities list that our senior women's administrator manages and does a wonderful job sharing the love, but also taking care of important priorities for our department on the women's side. So that's a little bit about ours. And I would say just another note about lasting impact is our women's programs are winning. And they were talented. They have always been talented, but we have seen a significant increase in our win-loss records since the launch of Women in Flight. Again, no data to support that being 100% correlated, but we do talk to recruits. We do utilize this with all of our teams, every single program, and we're seeing wins.
That's great. Tom.
So I mentioned the fundraising success before, but if you reflect kind of more holistically on the initiative, were relationships advanced? For these specific donors, mostly women, from 3 years ago to now, has this moved the needle? And I would say resoundingly yes. There's very specific relationships that this was targeted to. We received significant commitments from them. We engage them in significant ways. They feel closer to the college because of this. We're launching our comprehensive campaign now, so it's almost, it was all part of the strategy, but it worked. We identified 2 women trustees who are now on the board. We identified probably 10 additional kind of up and coming women who are now on our President's Leadership Council, from which many trustees eventually come. And so, in addition to the funds raised, the engagement, has been outstanding. And I would just, I guess, also say we had a very transactional approach to fundraising for the last 20 years. We built $250 million of facilities. Almost all of our fundraising was around naming. So we always, a new year, what's the building project? How do I get my name on that? And as Leah said, that was not always appealing to women and donors, who didn't see that as the primary focus of their philanthropy. And so to be able to do this, to tell stories around this, to just have such an emotional tie, it was the perfect program for Carthage as we were making that transition from transactional to, I would say, more emotional giving and impact related.
That's great. Yeah, I'm struck by the impact stories that each of you have, shared. It's beyond the transactional and how you've really been able to raise sites, give existing major donors to give more because you're having impact, you're changing lives, you're accomplishing all of these, things that you set out to do. A couple of the questions that we've gotten dropped in the chat here. You've touched on a lot of these as they've come in, but maybe you can drill down a little bit more succinctly. You talked about how this has been at each of your institutions a above and beyond and a value add as you're working through, whether it's with your AD or with your president or other leadership. Hey, it's another fund on a menu of options. How do we make sure we're not cannibalizing our existing priorities? How do you balance funding and different priorities for each, whether it's sport, program? Does that get decided by leadership? Do you try and be more donor centered? How do you guys manage this as another option on the menu of priorities and options that your donors have to give to?
I'm happy to jump in first on that one, but for us, again, we had a very clear purpose, and it was very much about investing in what athletics can do for the development of women, and investing both from a sort of personal time mentorship standpoint, but also financially. And so for us, we had an idea. Like I said, we had this kind of idea with the Excellence Fund about how to get coaches invested in the priorities and help them think strategically about how dollars that they receive from this fund could help them further the mission of the initiative. But we were also really clear from day one that we wanted to start small, start very, very in line with the mission, and then grow from there. And we were open to change. If we tried something and it flopped, that we would change, or if the circumstances changed, we could adjust. And lo and behold, Tom, you talked about it, COVID hits right after you have this great grand plan, and that was right before we were gonna, award money out of the Excellence Fund for the second round of kind of grant requests. And our leadership very smartly said, hey, those might not be our priorities anymore, the things that are sort of individual to the coaches. So let's pause and think about what our department needs right now. And what we ended up doing was just giving $10,000 to each women's sport out of that fund, just to help them get through the year. And that was this really cool thing that we could do for them. So I think to answer that question of balancing priorities, it's be very clear about what goals you have when you start out and what your purpose is, and try to really, as you get started, stay true to that, but also understand that anything new is new, and you don't even know what's coming, and you don't even really know what you'll discover along the way. So it's okay to change and say, hey, that idea wasn't quite right. We're going to go this way for one reason or another, and we're going to try this instead.
Great. Lexi, Tom, anything to add on to that? Good. Tom, maybe this for you. We have someone that's at a smaller school, a D2, right? And, maybe does not have the resources of a North Carolina or an Oregon or, some of the larger institutions. But, how would you, what advice would you share for a small D2 university in regards how to increase fundraising around this? Maybe you can even talk about how, Carthage's athletics program, so the raising money for women in athletics, was a part of the larger 150th celebration.
Sure. So we divided and conquered. The entire team was involved. It was nobody's main job, and it was, part of everybody's job. Our internal coordinating committee, they handled the programming on campus, and, we met on a monthly basis to check in on that. The volunteer committee, that's one thing I would just say, it seems like, as we, for those of us who work with that volunteers, like, great, we'll have volunteers, they'll do the work. It's almost always more work for us, as we know, working with volunteers. So I would just say, be very deliberate with your volunteer structure, who you put on those groups, and how you staff that, because that can suck, a lot of time and energy from the team. So I that's the best I can do, is divide and conquer. Maybe set parameters. This is what this is what it's not. This is how much we're willing to, invest in this program. And I guess one thing to the balance, we had an end date. Our end date was December 31st, 2020. And so that was something we could work, as a campaign, we could work to that. We said, donors, this is your last chance to give. And so that helped us, but, we didn't want it to be the end of it. So now we've got an annual event that we will continue to, build towards in an ongoing way. But that helped us also kind of balance, so that this just, it's one more tool in the tool belt, but now we've got other priorities that we're moving on to, and we'll revisit this occasionally.
Great. One more question here, and you may have touched on it, but this should be quick. Why don't you share with us, when you went into each of your initiatives, what was your dollar fundraising goal when you started? And then maybe even take a pulse of where you are, March 18th, 2021. What are some of your fundraising goals moving forward?
So I'll start with that. I had no idea what to expect here. We had, and again, this was a shift for us from, transactional to a different kind of philanthropy. And so 150 years of women, I set a conservative goal of 1.5 million, over 1 year period. We blew that away. We're at 3 million by within 6 months. So then we raised it to 6 million. And then, we ended at 8.2 million. So I would, we shot low, and it almost embarrassingly, surpassed that many times over. But that's unique to Carthage. Without knowing what to expect, I was pleasantly surprised.
Great. Yeah.
That's really awesome, first of all. So for us, again, I think the three of us are a really good example of how everybody can do this differently. For us, we were in a campaign. So we had really clearly defined fundraising goals for scholarship, capital projects, and team support, which fell into our $500 million by 2022 campaign goal. So we didn't want to distract from that. We wanted to enhance that effort. And so we looked at kind of forecasting what we had never really separated by men's sports and women's sports, those goals. And so we came up with a model to kind of figure out what does that look like in terms of our existing priorities. And our existing priorities added for women's sports up to about $87 million. And then we took that number and said, with the additional focus, with the additional strategic side of things, adding this initiative in with our additional ways to get prospects involved or steward donors, and just kind of with what we think might be out there, and with a very ambitious tone to it. We wanted this to sound like it really was the effort that it was going to be.
Mhm.
We raised that $87 million goal to $100 million. So that is our goal by 2022. And I think I said this earlier, but we're at 73 million now. And that end date for us, just for that number, will be December 31st, 2022 at the end of our campaign. But like Tom, we really didn't want this to be a campaign fad. We didn't want to raise money and then put it aside. So we intend to keep the programmatic side, the mentorship, the networking, that will stay. And then the fundraising goals beyond that are kind of yet to be determined.
Great. Lexi?
I will speak to the annual fund side of this. Our goal from the very beginning was to build that fund to the place where it was raising at least $250,000 a year. And that would be enough to maintain the programming that we had added. That goal now has gone up every single year. We had to adjust for COVID and bring it back down a little bit, but we're sitting at about 400 to 450,000 that we're shooting for on an annual basis. And then our major fund, or a major gift fund, I would say is our goals are more determined based on project and what our priorities are on that list, whether it's a $100,000 foreign tour or a $500,000 turf replacement or whatever it may be. Those vary. And then we also shoot for general support if we don't have a certain project to tie it to.
Great. Well, we got a couple minutes left. We're going to wrap up here in a second, but parting shot, put an exclamation point on it. Give everyone your best piece of advice on how to in a women's initiative. We'll go backwards. We'll go Lexi, Leah, and Tom to finish.
I have two thoughts here. First would be logistically. Find the right way for this to live in your CRM system. Find the right way for it to fit into whatever annual fund process, whatever gift tracking mechanism you use, and work with your data teams to do it so that you can pull accurate numbers and you can get as much donor data as possible for this initiative, because it is a different target group, and you do want to be able to show your progress, and you do want it to all go to the right place. We have a wonderful, wonderful data team that has worked so hard to continuously find ways to fit this in, but it's challenging, and it's taken a while for us to make sure that, and to define Women in Flight as its own fund in a way that when you're making a gift on Day of Giving, you can choose Duck Athletic Fund or you can choose Women in Flight. And that may not be the same for every school, but finding the way that it fits logistically, I would say really important to do up front. And then holistically, I would say tell your stories. Tell your stories and get your female student athletes involved in every way that you can. Provide that access to your donors, and the fundraising will take care of itself. That is the entire purpose of our program, is to support young women and to get them face to face with a donor that they know is financial, whether it's financially or putting their butt in a seat for a game. They are supporting that young woman, and that goes so far for our student athletes and so far for our fundraising efforts as well.
Thank you, Lexi. Leah?
Everything you just said, I completely agree. The data stuff, we had no idea, but this initiative really kind of allowed our fundraising team and our data team to realize we had never really put prospects in our CRM before. Like, we weren't even really equipped to track on prospects. And so this has kind of helped us get better at that process, just, in different ways. But I would say the one takeaway that I have is what Lexi said. Your student athletes and your coaches are the stars here. And it really is a transformation and an impact driven gift effort, and just figure out cool and creative ways to get your donors connected with your student athletes and your coaches, because your coaches care about those young women more than anybody, and your student athletes are living that experience every day. And so if you can make a difference by connecting them with a donor or something like that and helping them see the value in this initiative, they're going to be bought in, and they're going to, in turn, when they graduate and are successful, want to turn around and be part of it as well. And then on the donor side, like, there's not a whole lot as a fundraiser that you can do better than connecting them with a student athlete. And so if you can find really meaningful and fun, interesting ways to do that, I think you'll be set. And then just figure out your why. Figure out why you're doing it. What are you trying to accomplish? And then keep coming back to that, and you'll be in good shape.
Thanks, Leah. Tom?
Great. So I know we're at time, so I'll keep this brief. Giving in honor of somebody else transformed our fundraising. And so every opportunity that you can provide for donors to do that, whether it's a women's initiative or some other initiative, that's an extremely powerful philanthropic tool. Our gift agreements, for endowed scholarships, have a description now that's almost a page long, where the donor gets to tell why they're making this gift and why that person was important for them. And on an annual basis, we read it back to them and they're reminded of it. And so that was a game changer for us. And I think, we'll pay dividends long into the future as well.
Great. So much good stuff here, guys. Thank you so much for serving on our panel today. Leah, Lexi, thank you for bringing this to the executive team as an opportunity. Couple of pieces for the folks that are still on here. We have loaded a lot of resources in the NAD Community Center. Under the community resources in the library tab titles Women's Development Initiative, there are a lot of assets for you to reference. In addition, if you've got your own women's initiative going on, please upload your assets to that area so we can build out a library for people to hit. I'll be honest with you, one of the reasons why Leah and Lexi brought this to us is because you guys are in their email box all the time. Asking for help for this. And as much as they love helping you guys, the University of Oregon and North Carolina do have day jobs to do. So unless you want to pay the consultant fee to them, please reference this library of resources first. And also, if you've got more questions, please direct them to us at the executive committee, to Jason Galaska. And we want to continue this conversation and continue to provide content on how to do these women's initiatives and do them well. Because we all know that if we've learned anything today, it's how to do this really depends on making sure that you're finding a way that it fits and it is authentic at your institution. So again, thank you, panelists, for a wonderful hour spent on women's initiatives, how to. Grant, I'll turn it over to you.
All right, thanks, Jeremy, Leah, Lexi, and Tom. Thanks again for your time and energy today. I really appreciate you all for doing this. And Jeremy, great job. I really appreciate you leading us today. So please stay tuned for details regarding our next webinar. It's going to take place on April 8th. The topic is up and comers. Get ready to learn from some of our young leaders how they're navigating fundraising and engagement. So thanks again for joining us today, and have a great evening. Bye.